Just big toe.
All right, when this pops in, you'll be on. I'll keep you solo to start, and then you bring him in.
Hey guys, welcome to Balance Tip Tuesdays with Dr. James Spencer, the Balance and Movement Doc, and the inBALANCE team with Coach Don Stanley and Coach Mike Katz. Welcome, fellas.
Thanks, Doc. How you doing?
Good to see you, boys.
Likewise.
So today we're talking about big toe and balance. All right, and for the listeners out there, we got some good questions that were posed to us as far as the importance of what does big toe mobility look like? All right, and how important is that for balance as well as overall locomotion or movement? And I'd like to pose that question to you guys. What do you see in your practices? What do you see with your athletes in your gyms as far as big toe mobility and the importance of it? So Mike, if you want to take the lead on that, and then Don, you can follow up.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Big toe is a big one as far as balance is concerned. And, one thing that we've really noticed here at Mad Fitness is that when people seem to have a little bit more control and a little bit more big toe strength, then their balance and athletic performance both tend to improve. So the one thing that I really look at is when we're kind of taking a look at how much control somebody has in their big toe. Let's just say we're doing like a toe yoga drill, which would be, hey, your feet flat on the ground, and can you lift up your big toe independently, from your other four toes? And they see right away whether or not they have good command of that, and you can kind of see their brain kind of working and kind of trying to figure out for those that might not necessarily do that. And one way that I kind of like combat that from the back door is I'll do a lot of barefoot training and just give them more experience in their experience, as you like to say, Don, where they're actually having a lot of connection to the ground barefoot. And then I think naturally that kind of tends to improve just without them even really realizing it. But what we'll start to see at that point is that they're going to have a little bit better job on the beam, and they're going to do a better job kind of grabbing the ground in some of the strength exercise that we're going to do. And then they see a little bit more stability in their sport or out there in their life.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mike. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I find that I think in general that, an element of balance is that people in general just have a very poor awareness of their feet and weight distribution, whether they're on the balls or the heels or the insides or outsides of their feet. So I kind of, I spent 5 years working with NFL and NFL Combine and studying, high-end sprint mechanics. And we learned, the glute drives, power into the ground force reaction through the foot. So I learned it from kind of a top-down viewpoint. And then, when I started working with you, I started to learn really more about, the foot up the chain. And so what's really interesting to me is, even in my work with the NFL, there just seemed to be, really just catching on to, foot and ankle mechanics, dorsiflexion, so on and so forth, and how that, affected the kinetic chain. It seems like the big toe is still pretty, alien to a lot of people. They haven't even begun to consider the importance of that and how it affects the whole chain and human movement and certainly balance. So I think it's really understudied, and just in general, people are unaware of it, its role in, what I see particularly as a therapist, people that have bunions or even people that have had any kind of insult to the big toe, and they're having all kinds of issues, not just in the ankle, but also the knee, the hip, the low back. So I think it's something that really there's just a very poor understanding and poor awareness of how important, the big toe is in the kinetic chain.
And you see that, just ask anybody who's dealing with a turf toe injury and how important that is to have that mobility, So, from my standpoint, that was the one thing that really led to the cascade of issues for me down throughout my life. Is I broke my big toe when I was younger, and it literally created a whole havoc of issues for me throughout my life and injuries throughout my life, which has really put us on this journey of Barefoot and Balance.
Go ahead, Dom.
I
distinctly remember a point in time where, I'm dealing with gladiators, and then you hear about a guy that's, sidelined for 6-8 weeks with turf toe, and you're like, oh, come on, man, don't be a weenie.
Exactly.
And until it actually happens to you, and they're like, oh wow, man, I can't move, I can't walk, every little thing that I do is like, yeah.
And I think for the listeners at home, let's create some context for them. The joint by joint approach us three are very familiar with, but for the people at home, the easiest way to explain biomechanics is really mobile segments on stable joints. And the one thing that we look at is the big toe should be mobile. A lot of times with our aging athletes, whether they're 60 or 70 or 80 years old, we notice that big toe is extremely stiff, right? And that typically leads to more of a stabilizer of the ankle versus a propeller of movement. So when we're looking at the joint by joint approach, we want to make sure that big toe is mobile. The midfoot should be stable. The ankle should be mobile. And as we work our way up the chain, the knee should be stable and the hip mobile. And understand that there should be an amount of stability and mobility in each joint. But for an easy way to understand or learn how the body is actually working, that's the area of focus of mobility on stable segments. So is there anything that you guys would like to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of like piggyback on one of the points that Don was making as far as like the awareness. And, for those of you that are kind of like listening at home, and you kind of just touched on this, Spence, it might be a little bit foreign to like think about the importance of your toes. That's something that we don't really think about on a regular basis. But Don, you brought this up, where it really does come into play, where people kind of have like that aha moment is the bunions. That's the big one where people kind of really understand, okay, there's a narrowing at my toe base. There's a little bit like less mobility. And you said you need that mobility, and they don't have it from a static position or from when they're trying to actually move. So I think that's kind of where you get that kind of understanding. And if you think about what it looks like physically to have a bunion, how that might be a little bit more of a narrow base for somebody, and they might have a little bit less proficiency in movement. But for those of you that do not have that or are unfamiliar with bunions, just think about it from a more logical perspective of where does all movement derive from? Where does it all begin? It all starts from the ground up. That's the point of contact that you have with the ground. So I think that was a really good point to kind of bring up, that maybe everyone's not familiar with the joint by joint approach, but people are familiar as what is the one connection that you do have with the earth. All right, it is your feet.
I just want to add, when we talk about the joint by joint, certainly amongst us, this isn't anything new or groundbreaking. I learned about the joint by joint over a decade ago. And it really absolutely revolutionized everything that I do. And I still find that there's large segments of the industry that just have a poor understanding. They kind of understand flexibility to an extent, but it's like 1970s technology, So they're trying to wrap their head around, joint mobility and how that is different from flexibility. And so just that lack of understanding, and then you add stability on top of that. And we certainly understand that when you have a lack of stability in joints, that the brain is going to create compensations throughout the body to generate stability. And so the experience for most people, when they feel the brain creating stability, they think that, oh, I need to stretch stuff. And so they're kind of going in and they're creating a lot of systemic instability in the system because they're trying to stretch out. So I just didn't want to gloss over that, because again, we're very familiar with the joint by joint, and it really drives everything that we do. But you see large swaths of the industry, whether it's massage therapists, chiropractors, that are still, not really understanding that correlation between mobile joints and stable segments.
Yeah, that's all very good points, and I appreciate the input that you guys have given. And I think that's something that really, when we learned the joint by joint approach, they didn't include the big toe, and then they slowly added that. So again, to your point, a lot of this, although it is foreign for many, it's not a new concept for us. This is something we've been working on for a while, and it's part of the imbalance evaluation as well. Is, do you even have the mobility, number one, and number two, do you have the ability to control that big toe? Right, and that's something that will segue into the next question that we received from one of our listeners is, how important is big toe control as well as overall strength? And with that, that's something that we've been looking into for quite some time. Is we're using a toe dynamometer, and what that is it's a way to evaluate toe strength, just like we would look at upper extremity grip strength. This is another way that we can assess objectively how strong is somebody's big toe as well as the other four digits, and is our programming improving that? And one thing that we had last week in our conversation was there's research to support that improving toe strength by 1% reduces your chances of falls to nearly 10%. And so again, for our aging athletes, that's pretty vital to learn that. And an easy test to do at home is called the Valet's lean forward test. And essentially what this is a way that you stand up vertically, you're stiff as a board, and you just take your center of mass slightly forward. Your toes should be able to drive into the ground and stabilize for you. A lot of times that's what happens to our older population is, as they lean forward or they're a little unsteady and they start to go here, they continue to move forward because they don't have that toe strength. So I know with the imbalance training and the programming and a lot of our athletes, that's something that we're working on, is really good toe strength. So Dom, please chime in, bud.
Yeah, just as a basic understanding, if you know of your foot, is when you can't particularly flex your big toe when it's stiff, then you start to externally rotate your foot to get around the fact that you can't flex. And so now when you externally rotate your foot, your arch drops to the floor, and it creates a whole cascade that goes into your ankle and up your knee and into your hip. So to your point, I'm sure we've all experienced that with bunions, and I've even have worked with some people that for whatever reason they had a surgery to the base joint of the big toe, and now their whole entire foot has shifted. Literally, the shape of their foot, the function of the foot, the function of the arch has totally shifted. And as we know, that when you have a compensation, particularly in the foot and the ankle, and then over time you're weight bearing, load bearing, the bones in your feet actually change shape. And once you reach that level and you start setting up, bone spurs and all that kind of stuff, it's very, very difficult. So to, address all of those issues. So it's really, the sooner that you work on this stuff, the better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Mike, is there anything you'd like to add on that, bud?
I kind of want to piggyback on how important it is to start earlier in your life, just like Don was kind of alluding to. And if you just think about the test that you just brought up, case in point right there, if someone's leaning forward and they can't catch themselves, think about how much more likely that person is to fall. If you can actually use your toes as a stabilizer in that instance, to be able to correct yourself without having to actually physically step forward, that's a lot less chance of fall. So when we look at the imbalance, mission, performance is a big one, but also longevity, is something that we really, really look at. So as far as getting older in life, and you have that shift, you have that rounded shoulder, you have that forward head posture, you're looking down at your feet, you're doing the senior shuffle. If you're always leaning forward and don't have that strength, you don't have that available stability to catch you, that's a recipe for disaster.
And as we talked about before, it's confidence, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
We want to give them confidence to move forward with things.
Yes, absolutely.
I know this isn't new information to you guys, but if we really want to blow people's mind, as a therapist, if I've heard this once, I've heard it 1,000 times. I have flat feet. And most usually when someone has flat feet, they also have low back pain and a host of other issues. So just taking that foot and putting it into a neutral position and building an arch and engaging the big toe, now all of a sudden they have an arch and they can engage their abs and their core, and all of a sudden that low back pain goes away. So magical stuff.
So we got a question coming in here. What are some simple everyday exercises we can do for home or at the gym to help strengthen? And looks like Chris Kopp beat us to the punch. He knew what our notes looked like today. So that's really what we want to do here is offer solutions. And some of the exercises for that, it's as easy as one of the old school towel crunch exercises, where you literally have a towel here and your toes will curl it up and drag it forward. So that's one way that's easy, as well as a lot of the banded exercises. Once you're able to have the foot dexterity of the 4 digits here, then the big toe. So a lot of times it's, can we lift up the toes? Okay, can we do that? Can we now control the 4 digits while not moving the big toe, and vice versa? So those are a few, and I'm sure you guys have some that you'd like to add as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as the big toe strength downward anyway, one thing that I'll do is I'll take a little mini band and I'll actually place it underneath someone's big toe, and I'll kind of give it a very light tug and see if they're able to kind of hold on to that band. And the more that they can kind of progress, the more tension I can kind of put on that band. You can obviously progress that by having them do certain movements while you're either grabbing, or perturbating the band. But I like to just start off with, press down into the band and see if they can hold it steady as a starting point.
And really, we could do that 2 ways. Is if this is the big toe, we could put the band underneath and pull it to the side to make sure that the big toe is pushing down on it, or we can pull the band up and make sure the big toe is staying down in contact with the ground.
Correct.
Don, what you got for us?
Well, I've been studying jiu-jitsu for about 6 years now, and so routinely I will sit in a kneeling position, in a plantar flex position. I'll sit on my heels and stretch the top of my feet and my toes. What's really interesting, though, is if you tuck your toes underneath so that your toes are flexed and you sit on your heels, you realize like how much limitation is in your toes, and particularly the big toe. And so what I like to do is, take a ball and kind of sit back on the ball, and that allows you to have some control of depth. So you can kind of sit back on your heels and really, work those toes in that flexed position and kind of control the pressure. That's one of my favorites for mobility.
Yeah, I agree with you. And even us down here in South Florida, having the ability to walk barefoot on the beach, that's also another simple solution where you can just literally grab the sand with your feet, lift up, and drop. So that way you're learning a little bit of strength through the whole foot as well as the big toe itself. And, another solution we offer is the toe spacers. Like with some of the pedicures that our females or significant other get, they have those spacers that go in between the toes. Ours are a little bit thicker and a little bit more rigid, but having that, being able to splay your whole foot out, just increases the surface area in contact with the ground. And by doing that, having more surface area, more contact on the ground, that increases your balance and stability itself. So another solution that we like to provide with our programming here. Anything else that you fellas think or would like to add to that?
I was gonna talk about picking stuff up with your toes. You already addressed that with the sand. I don't have that. I don't have that luxury anymore in my life as far as that's concerned.
How about the snow? How about the snow up in the Northeast?
Yeah,
Right?
there you go. Perfect. It'll go right along with that cold therapy that's hot these days. So
exactly.
Yeah, I could definitely put that into.
Don, anything else you got for us?
Yeah, I just, I guess without sounding like a plug, a lot of the progressions that we do in the balance training, like walking on the beam, if you focus your eyes so that you're not looking at your feet, then you're going to engage your toes a lot more in the movement, because you can't collect information with your eyes. So now your body is going to do what it's built to and designed to do, which is, even if you do this, so you can't look at your feet, you're naturally going to engage your toes more to feel. So all of the beam walks, even walking across the tape, all of that balance training just engages your toes a lot more.
Yep.
And honestly, it's also just as simple as lifting heavy weights barefoot.
Barefoot training.
You when you carry some heavy weight, whether it's kettlebells or doing any kind of farmer carry progression, if you're barefoot, your feet have to work to be able to propel forward. And that creates that stiff, rigid force to then become a locomotor. So, good question, Chris. And it's as easy as that. I don't want people to compulse on this. We just wanted to create more awareness that the big toe is vital. And especially when we're looking at the idea of really standing on an arch or a structure. It's the big toe, the baby toe, and the heel kind of create that pyramid, that stability and that foundation for strength and balance throughout the whole foot of the kinetic chain. So,
you bring up a great point there, Spence. I like to think about, how I like to go rock climbing now and then. So Thursday evenings typically, but I like to think about these kinds of things. How good would my grip strength be if I was going around wearing mittens all day?
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
I mean, you touched on it, we're basically inside foot mittens all day. It's as simple as, grabbing a kettlebell and taking your shoes off.
Yeah, exactly. So I know that's kind of the key points that we had for today's live. We're going to be doing a Balance Tip Tuesday every week. The three amigos here working on whatever we can to help educate you. If you guys would submit questions, comments, I know anything that we can do to help as we walk on this journey together. I know us three here are here to help. So please reach out with any questions you have or any DMs. I know both Coach Mike and Coach Don would be happy to give their input as well. So even from a fitness and performance side or from the medical side, go ahead and submit your questions. And that's really all we had for today. I think we're going to finish with the clip of the day where, Chris coming in overtime here. He says, great info today, fellas. Much appreciated. Thanks for chiming in, bro.
Thank
and
you.
Anything we can do to help your golf game, please reach out.
We know you need it.
So let's go ahead. We'll finish with the clip of the day as always. And this was a little video that I did with Eric Cressy when I wrote an article for him on big toe, big problems, creating awareness for how important the big toe was for overall life and function, but also for baseball. So guys, I'm Dr. James Spencer with drjamesspencer.com. Today we're going to be looking at a functional exercise to help increase this big toe mobility. We'll be looking here to maintain that nice neutral arch while working on that big toe extension here. So as you can see there, my beard was looking stellar in that video. And also, you notice how actually Eric has very good control of his big toe and of his 4 digits. But he also deadlifts barefoot and 500 pounds. So, having a good arch and good stable structure to do what he needs to do is something that he displayed very well in that video. So thank you, fellas, for joining us, and we look forward to many more.
Thank you.
Have a good one, guys.